Okay, so 18 and 19 is our last unit before the state test. Works out pretty well. 18 is classification, 19 is the Earth's history. Fancy sciencey word for classification is taxonomy. And it turns out that a lot of our modern biological classification system is based on a guy from the 1700s named Carolus Linnaeus. Not that his actual putting of organisms into groups was necessarily accurate, but the system he used to do it. The names of the different levels of classification he used, we still mostly also use. Amanda. Yes, it's the big long thing you have to memorize, which can be a pain, but first of all, we're all about dumb ways to remember stuff, so we'll be fine. Second of all, at least you don't have to memorize a lot of the actual groups themselves, which biology used to be very much classification focused. Like we'd spend half the year on names of animal groups and plant groups and all that. So it's much less focused on that, but we at least need to know the taxa. And taxa means the groups of sort of more and more specific bearing that we use to put organisms into. He laid out 7 taxa. Linnaeus did. We've added one since then on the top. And by the top, I mean the most general. There used to be kingdom. It started out there were only 2 kingdoms, animals and plants. And then, of course, we gradually discovered that there's bacteria and fungi and a kingdom called protists, and there was 5 kingdoms. Now there's 6 because we discovered a group of bacteria that are so different from regular bacteria that they get their own groups. And in fact, those 2 groups of bacteria are so different from everything else that we added the group domain. So domain is the highest taxon, that's the singular of taxa, in Linnaean classification now, or in modern classification. What we're going to do is go through all 8 of them. And for starters, we're just going to classify humans and the domestic dog into their proper taxa, just to kind of show you how it works. And then I'm going to have you working with them yourself. So the domain that both humans and dogs belong to is basically the non-bacterial domain. There's 2 domains of bacteria, of prokaryotes, in other words, and then there's the domain eukarya. And humans and dogs both belong to that one, because their cells have nuclei and membrane-bound organelles and all that stuff. Then kingdom, and the kingdoms being 2 different bacterial kingdoms: protists, fungi, animals, and plants. Of course, humans and dogs both in the kingdom Animalia. These group names are often kind of Latinized, because Latin is sort of the accepted language of science. But you'll get the gist. Animalia, obviously animals. Next comes phylum. And humans and dogs both belong to the phylum of animals, because that's how this goes. It sort of subdivides, right? The phyla of the animal kingdom. And the one that humans and dogs both belong to are the ones with spinal cords. They're called chordates. Chordata is the name of the phylum. Domain, kingdom, phylum, class. Humans and dogs both belong to the same class. It is the class of chordates that are warm-blooded, hairy, give live birth instead of laying eggs, and this is actually where they get their name. They have these specialized glands in the females of this class that make like this perfectly suited baby food to feed their young. What's the name of this class? We are both Mammals, named after our mammary glands. Good, class Mammalian. And here's where we split. This is the last class before humans and dogs split into different groups. So order is the next group. And the order of mammals that humans belong to is the primates, right? We share that group with New World monkeys, Old World monkeys, and apes. But dogs are in a different order. They're in the carnivores, along with all the other canines and felines and ursines, bears, and stuff like that. So we've split now. And so now you look at, and it's pretty easy here because from here on out, once we hit the family level, humans are kind of by themselves at this point. We are hominids in the family Hominidae. There were other hominids. We have fossil evidence of other hominids, but they're all extinct. So just us left. Dogs are in the family Canidae. They're canids along with foxes, coyotes, and others. And these last two are important, 7 and 8, the genus and the species. The genus of humans is Homo. Again, there have been others, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, but they are extinct. And of dog is Canis. Then the species name, do you know, for humans? Sapiens is the species. Homo is the genus. But Homo sapiens sounds familiar, doesn't it? Okay, so you already know something about how we scientifically name living things. So Homo sapiens, sapiens is the species. Lupus or familiaris is the species name of the dog, depending on which system you want to use. Classic arguments between taxonomists, they tend to fall into the categories of lumpers and splitters. The lumpers want lupus because it puts dogs as the same species as wolves. And it is true that many dogs are capable of interbreeding with wolves. But if you want to split them off, it's familiaris, which is what we often use as a species name for domesticated animals. So what you know now is that for the scientific name of organisms, we have a very specific system. It's called binomial nomenclature, which, man, I hate it when really simple things are named really complicated names. And this is one of those. Binomial nomenclature is a really fancy way of saying that we use a system of naming that uses two names. Literally, that's what it means. Binomial means two names. Nomenclature means a system of naming things. And of course, the two names we use for an organism's scientific name are the genus and the species. Now, before you write down number 1 there, here's what you need to know. We're going to be real picky about how you write these things. If you are handwriting, which you are now, if you're handwriting, the way you write a scientific name is very specific. You capitalize the genus, you don't capitalize the species, and you underline the whole thing in one chunk. That's how people know you're writing a scientific name. Scientists across the world know that if they see a handwritten paper and it has capital, lowercase, whole thing underlined, that's a scientific name. That's a genus and a species. If you are typing, which of course is more likely these days, quick note that it's not underlined anymore. If you're typing, you italicize both. Still capital and lowercase, but you italicize both the genus and the species. Now there is a way to abbreviate this so you don't have to write or type as much. Anybody know it? Scientists take a shortcut lots of times if it's a species if it's a living thing that lots of people know about. Escherichia coli is a good example that might get you there.
Only just like abbreviate the first letter for.
You're often allowed to use the first letter, first initial of the genus. So E. coli, you might have heard of, it's an intestinal bacterium that you all have, but when it mutates and is outside the body, it can make you sick. But yeah, super important. Capitalize the genus, don't capitalize the species, underline the whole thing. In your case, or if you're typing, italicize the whole thing. It sounds nitpicky, but it literally is the way scientists know that they're looking at a scientific name. So it's important. So you're going to have to know those. You're going to have to know domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. This is kind of the just made for a mnemonic device, isn't it? The kind of thing where you figure out some catchy, vivid saying that starts with the first letter of each of those to help you remember it. There are lots. I think the most common one these days is, "Dear King Philip came over for good spaghetti." I don't think it's that great. So I'm going to give you an opportunity here. Come up with your own. I will pick my favorites and give them a small amount of extra credit. So what I'm going to do, and this is not, this is optional. You don't have to do this at all. But I'm going to put a form into Classroom by the end of the period in which you can get in there once I just kind of scratch it out on paper, figure out your own little saying that's vivid and easy to remember and hangs together well. It makes sense to remember. Domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, and put it in that form. And I will take my favorites, probably from each class, and give them a little bit extra credit. I'm not going to show you any others examples because I don't want to influence your creativity, but that's the idea. I want you to work with these a little bit more, though. I'm going to give you some living things to classify. So this is just a little chart. I think there's 5. 5 different living things that I'll give you. They're not on here. I'll give them to you separately. And you're just going to have to use the internet to find out which domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species they belong to. Okay? And that'll be today. You got one? Yeah. Nice. No. I want to see it.